Hi, I'm Becca Falborn, your host and executive producer at Lime Studios NYC, and this is Mill Talk, the podcast exploring trends, big ideas, and creative works that relate to advertising, production, and the digital arts. In this week-long series, we'll meet the makers at the Mill, pioneering new technologies that are revolutionizing brand marketing in the virtual and physical worlds. On this episode, we'll be sitting down with Alex Wills, the Mill's Global Chief Experience Officer. Alex works at the intersection of creativity and technology, harnessing new digital platforms and emerging technologies to give brands and business a competitive edge. He has a long history as a maker, thinker, and doer, having previously worked at AKQA as creative director and establishing and leading the integrated content studio for RGA London. We're excited to hear Alex's thoughts on the evolution of experiences and what changes are in store in this space. Thank you for joining us today, Alex.
Very nice to be here.
Awesome. So I'm told you've recently started your position as Chief Experience Officer at the Mill, so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Can you give us a little background on you, your experience, and what it means for the Mill to now have a CXO?
Absolutely. So I kind of cut my teeth in all of this, way back in AKQA days. So it was sort of the birth of kind of emerging technologies like mobile going from WAP to smartphone and Facebook and, the internet, really broadband speeds kicking off and being fast enough to do digital video. And it was such an exciting time and such an entrepreneurial culture. We were able to sort of, create stuff for one of our anchor clients at the time, Nike, and produce amazing kind of online experiences and brand experiences that connected with their younger and emerging audiences. And it was really, really good time. I kind of built up the content studio there and even directed a number of sort of online films and actually worked with the Mill on a number of Xbox films, which was pretty exciting at the time. And then I moved to RGA, which was quite similar, but in startup mode in London. And our anchor client there, our sort of innovation client, was Beats by Dre, who was run by Omar Johnson, ex-Nike, who was the CMO. Again, we got to do some wonderful content and experiences, some game engine driven live interview content pieces, which was exciting. And I grew the studio there, developed the studio and built that out. And then I worked more with clients and winning business and going inside clients. We had a great business with Siemens and other massive clients, and enjoyed that sort of understanding sort of business problems and helping solve them for that. And I was really interested more and more in the sort of next computing platform, the sort of emerging, it's called spatial computing, AR, VR, XR, and where that was coming from. And at the time, the more traditional, even though RJ wasn't that traditional, but digital agencies weren't able to, in my opinion, sort of look at this third space, this emerging three-dimensional space, whereas the more traditional visual effects companies and emerging tech companies like the Mill and others were, had this capability. They've always had an amazing sort of artistry and understanding of 3D and such like. And so I thought, well, this is going to be an interesting next place to be, and wanted to be at the sort of forefront of being able to make and also, think about the things, but actually have the capability to execute at the same time. So that was sort of the potted history up to sort of today, and joining the Mill 2 weeks ago, and as CXO, which is a new position and at the global level for the Mill, and kind of look at it in three ways. The first is audience experience, and really, everything we do, should be sort of through the lens of how does it going to make someone sort of feel and think and do, whether that be an amazing piece of visual effects that drives a narrative for an amazing advert or film online or in the cinema, through to everything from an experience that could be a VR experience or an AR experience, some of the stuff we've done for HBO. And so just looking at that full gamut of audience experience, and increasingly the audiences are in multiple different places. They're harder to reach for brands. They're creating content themselves. Their barrier of kind of like, or their bar of excellence is so high. We have to sort of match that. So really zooming in on the audience experience. The other component is the client experience. So that has changed quite a lot, certainly for the Mill and in general. The rise of in-housing, the development of agencies within brands, and the sort of the capability and the quality of sort of those units now are brilliant, and they want partners who can execute, and we're brilliantly placed to do that. They also want partners sometimes to think and interrogate a brief and look at the business problem as well. And we can do that now as well. So really understanding what a partner will want out of us, and being able to sort of field the right team to do that. And then finally, the employee experience. We're everything's becoming more global. The world is turning quicker than ever, and so it's understanding how we can create a better experience for our teams globally to help collaborate and produce this amazing work. And it could be sort of a piece of work that originates in LA and gets produced in London, or vice versa. So
Hmm.
how to help enable that is the tough part, and that's kind of another part of my sort of remit, I think. Joining the mill. So hugely exciting, and then helping work with Josh and the leadership to, really see what's next, and what focus on the really exciting spaces that are opening up for experiences and 3D and things like the metaverse and all of that. So yeah, an exciting remit.
Yeah, for sure. And so we're bringing up this term experience. So for our listeners, what does the term experience encompass? Are we focusing on brand experience, experiential marketing, user experience, or all of the above?
A little bit all of the above. I think, brands have realized that, there's kind of two components to working or developing audience relationships. It's one
Hmm.
through amazing narrative storytelling. Storytelling is still here to stay, and it's a great way to emotionally connect your brand with an audience. But also the other side of it is experiences. Audiences are craving, well, unfortunately, they can't have them at the moment in the real world experiences. But
Yeah.
before all of this, we're really wanting more sort of, physical experiences, whether that be, music related or sports related,
Hmm.
or a combination, and increasingly as a result of the pandemic, digital experiences as well. So just that notion of, yeah, an experience that kind of connects a deeper, could be interactive, could be more engaging. It's just that sort of that right wise, sort of wider trend from brands,
Hmm.
to help do that. So the brand experience as a whole, and then when we get down into it, yeah, that can manifest itself in an amazing piece of experiential marketing to
Hmm.
launch a new entertainment property,
Yeah.
or it could be an amazing experience for a visitor attraction. So more and more, we're
Hmm.
looking at sort of what is that digital layer on top of a museum or a sports stadium, or a visitor attraction, where now what we can do with technology is just enhance and extend that experience in pretty exciting ways. So it does run the full gamut. Experience being the kind of catch all, just sort of developing a deeper engagement with the audience, and then looking at it through, yeah, brand marketing, experiential marketing, but all the way through to these amazing, new visitor attractions and experiences we can do as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, i- as we've talked about on this podcast previously, the lasting effects of the pandemic, one of the aspects from COVID that I think will linger for a while post, full vaccinations and whatnot is social distancing to some extent and the need for physical personal space. So, how do we make distance palatable for consumers during real world experiential events?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Funny enough, it was in a brief that we looked at this morning, for a visitor attraction, and just how they're now doing space planning and evolving experiences, or certainly for new experiences, it's easier. Adapting existing ones is slightly harder, because for physical experiences, it was always tough having the amount of throughput. You wanted queues and all of that kind of thing. So I think
Hmm.
it's exciting to see, or it's encouraging to see it being woven into the kind of space planning and future attractions
Hmm.
and experiences. And it's just really, really important. And hopefully technology can play a bit of a part in that, in terms of sort of sequencing flow of people
Yeah.
through spaces. I'm a big fan of sort of spatial audio and the roles that can play in this kind of space as well. But yes, I think we are, I think, craving sort of real world physical experiences, but
Hmm.
it won't be a sudden sort of flood back to sort of what it was, because things have changed, and people's acceptance of what they feel comfortable with will vary differently. So I think it's our responsibility to create experiences with that in mind, and enable sort of different different levels of sort of yeah, intensity to sort of be realized depending on comfortableness.
Yeah. I mean, even just this past weekend, I was talking to a few of my friends about concerts and sporting events and how vastly different those will be experience wise moving forward. And is sitting in a tiny box seat in at Yankee Stadium a thing of the past? Are we going to see that there will be construction on these existing spaces to make it more accommodating for more space between each spectator? It's very interesting to see, like, what will the world look like after it's somewhat normal again.
Mm. I think I think it will just take time. I think certain things will flood back. Other things like that, I mean, sort of a massive music event or conference will be really will take a bit of time. But I
Yeah.
think, all things willing, with the vaccination and the amazing rollout of that and the speed of that in a lot of places, not enough places, will be the ultimate sort of unlock where people will go. This
Mhm.
is something we will eventually learn to live with, however
Mhm.
however tough that is. And I think, that will then enable a return to the things we all love, doing. But it will be a return to that, but it will now be fundamentally augmented with a technology component, whether that be hybrid or virtual
Mhm.
extension of that event, which I think has changed forever.
Exactly. So, kind of brings me to my next question. So, there's talk about experiential events in particular becoming a hybrid of the physical and the virtual of mixed reality. So, do you echo those sentiments? And if so, why?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's just evidence with the recent IPO of Roblox last week, which was, wish I'd invested in that a while ago. But I think with that, the floating of Roblox and just the trend that we're seeing with, I mean, obviously the one that gets consistently mentioned is the Travis Scott and Fortnite
Hmm.
concert, but it's they're the obvious ones, and everyone wants to recreate that, but it's a bit of a one-off. And I think where you look at sort of some of the other areas where just the recent Microsoft conference and what they did with that, and I think and actually you go down just to the audiences and
Yeah.
the emerging younger audiences and what they are going to demand as they sort of are increasingly more important in as they sort of grow up and such like. So this generation who are in Roblox and have been in Minecraft and are gamers kind of through and through, a vast proportion of them
Yeah.
are gonna push a lot of this stuff because they are just going to demand a different type of experience, a different type of interaction, and still very much in the real world as well. But this hybrid or this sort of complete digital mix is just natural to them, and
Yeah.
I think therefore that is the reason why ultimately it's not a sort of, oh, is it going to go back to normal, is it not? I think there's going to be a huge rebound to physical events, thankfully. I can't wait to go to a concert and I can't wait to go to a sporting event with other
Same.
people. But and and that's great, and I think there will always be a need for that, a demand for that. But it is fascinating looking at what this latest new generation is going to expect from an event, and I think those massive platforms and ever increasing ones being developed either in stealth or by the big tech companies are
Hmm.
going to facilitate and cater to that increasing desire for a more on demand culture, interactivity, social, global, what those things are sort of, they're kind of like the underpinning elements that I think this new audience is going to demand. So I think that's what's going to drive it into ever increasing sort of, very, very interesting new types of experiences.
Yeah, and when you think about it, like I one of my friends who have discussed like concerts specifically with, we were, looking at pictures of some concerts that like people were in their own little like deck looking like pod square whatever with four people, and then there's another one, and that's how everyone was viewing this concert. I think I forget what country it was in, maybe Australia, right before they went. They're doing great down there. I'm very jealous of them. But they had this, it was like much less people at this concert, and you had your own individual space with your group, and then there's a virtual component as well for anyone who's not physically there. So then like you start to think, how does ticketing look like for someone who's viewing from home as opposed to someone who's viewing in person? And then you also start to think about like, you can have friends all over the world. I'm here in New York and my friend in California. We might want to go to the same concert, but we can't go to the same concert together. Maybe we can now that one of us can view it remotely and the other one can physically be there and not be, Snapchatting each other the entire time or something like that. So there is just so many possibilities that come from something like this. But then it's just interesting to think like, does someone who's viewing from home pay the same amount as someone who gets to go physically in person? Like, how does that then end up working? It's so interesting to see it roll out.
Yeah, it recently did quite a lot of research into this space as well, which is what you're seeing is sort of the base level, just the pay-per-view, market, and people really testing, and I know
Hmm.
Gorillas have done stuff in that, Dua Lipa did stuff in that, and actually they're quite traditional executions in a way. They're quite sort of, I
Yeah.
mean, Dua Lipa's is quite sort of televisual type sort of event,
Hmm.
and there hasn't necessarily been as much sort of innovation in those examples
Yeah.
where sort of they're getting to pay. But I think that's the sort of the generation that will come next. Obviously the
Hmm.
Travis Scott event was a different type of thing, but I think the monetization, and again, they're trying to work this out in traditional linear film content. I mean, only
Hmm.
recently Disney are sort of trying to work out if people are going to pay for their latest releases, that edition. And it's going to be fascinating to see, well, they won't release them for a while, but to see what the appetite is for that. You're already
Hmm.
paying X amount a month, and then suddenly you have to pay more. And it makes sense if you were going to go to the cinema, you'd pay that. But
Yeah.
then it's going to be really interesting what audiences are going to tolerate and not. And I think the media and entertainment industry are really, really looking at that to see, okay,
Yeah.
how to monetize this content, and then how to actually sort of monetize, yeah, these newer types of experiences and engagements, and hopefully not falling down some of the traps, certainly of maybe the news and previous evolutions of media, where it was given away for free for too long, and then it was hard to put the genie back in the bottle. So I think
Hmm.
how to sort of the willingness for people to pay and the monetization aspects there are going to be interesting. But we're seeing interesting things like tipping, which is mainly sort of in Asia for videos, and other types of monetization coming in.
Uh-huh.
Because if it's not advertising driven, which is a big sort of trend, then it has to be paid for by somehow. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting seeing those a multitude of different kind of payment models and yeah, economies building up around it.
Yeah. So, on the topic of what stays and what goes, are virtual events here forever? Was there a rise in them before the pandemic struck that people may have been unaware of?
Yes, I think they were gaining. I think like through the Roblox point and Fortnite and these big, social platforms and Animal Crossing, what amazing kind of timing, this the appetite for, existing in virtual worlds and social worlds, however physically real or however sort of, realized fidelity wise was on the rise anyway.
Hmm.
I think in terms of and so it was a natural kind of fit going, okay, well, we'll use some of these to do more concerts and more events in. So I think that was kind of happening anyway, but
Uh-huh.
but they're still mostly interacted with in a two-dimensional way, like via a screen as opposed to via a headset.
Hmm.
And I think the most exciting element is going to be when the headsets sort of, are powerful enough and ubiquitous enough to warrant then bigger spends. So like I said about the pay-per-view piece, it's like that's because everyone has a phone and everyone has a screen. And so they're going to be um, that's a pretty good monetization pass for,
Hmm.
a big concert. It's like, cool, you're going to pay £10 to see Gorillas or whatever it might be. They don't, that doesn't exist yet for, even though the Oculus is
Yeah.
selling pretty well. I think the next wave, and Mark Zuckerberg was talking about it only last week about Oculus 3 and 4 and the fact that they're planning that sort of hardware pipeline. And we know Apple are waiting in the wings with their sort of rumored headset for 2022, 23. And I think that will be the real catalyst that will build upon the foundations that have already been set and the worlds that have already been created and the
Hmm.
behaviors that have been sort of generated. And that's where you really that's when those experiences will be incredible, because you
Yeah.
will feel presence and you will feel like you're in a space with your friend or with other friends around the world, experiencing these things. And I think that'll be the sort of that'll light the touch paper for those more immersive experiences ongoing.
Definitely. So, what technological developments will enhance experiential capabilities?
So I mean, the technology development across the board for experiences involve kind of a couple of components. One of the most underlying is real time game engine technology, and I think if you even strip it apart from the sort of the headset debate or any other technology around XR, it's like that is the driving foundational layer which enables worlds to be created that one can interact and move through um, in real time. So I think the development of that, and we've obviously seen it, the two major players are obviously Unity and Epic. And Epic is just, either buying or developing at the rate of knots to sort of build out this capability. UE5 should be coming out later this year, which offers a level of fidelity and tool sets that are just going to be, so exciting for artists. And it's going to be pretty exciting to see, what a lot of the teams will be doing with them in the mill, and they're already sort of tinkering, and we have very strong relationships with Epic. And I think that is going to be a major part of sort of pushing this forward, because it just allows you to create more amazing and more immersive experiences.
Hmm.
That's one part. And like I said, that's still for the majority delivered through 2D flat screens. And so
Yeah.
the other part of the sort of spatial computing piece is headsets, is true immersive sort of headsets with the resolution to allow people to wear them for a significant amount of time, and then properly sort of immerse themselves into it. And I think that those two sort of pieces are kind of the major components. I mean, obviously in the background, it's got to be cloud, cloud and edge. I think 5G will play a part,
Hmm.
obviously, to sort of, kickstart this. But I think it's the engines and the worlds, and then the immersive access to them, which will then be facilitated with the technologies like 5G and edge to sort of enable them to be kind of more mobile and more readily accessible by
Hmm.
everyone. And then within that, though, it's looking at the individual components of what makes a compelling experience, because I think what's missed by many is a major reason that these huge networks have built up, or these huge platforms have built up, is because they're social networks.
Yeah.
They're Roblox and Fortnite are a form of social networks hidden in a sort of creator experience and a game. They're massive networks, hence why Facebook are pretty interested in the space, and others. So I think that is social mechanics, that sharing, that creating.
Hmm.
That's when you get into the experience design piece, as well as the sort of technology piece. So I think it goes hand to hand. But yeah, engines, headsets are the sort of the two ends of that kind of spectrum, I think, which will really drive it.
Yeah. So, growing off of that, does the future of brand experience rely on these emerging technologies?
Yes and no. I think the future brand experience is going to be incredibly, supercharged by exactly what I just said. I think the Apple
Hmm.
moment, it may not be quite as transformative as the iPhone moment, but even that took 5+ years to be that moment. So
Yeah.
we sometimes forget that. But I think those experiences, I think those technologies will, but it will take time. I kind of seeing it as a decade, piece. Everyone's sort of saying what's
Yeah.
happening next year and the year after. It's like, well, it's sort of a 10-year journey, and I think yes, those technologies will offer up another level of brand experience that
Hmm.
we can sort of see and have a hint at, because the reason why I'm hesitant, sort of certainly in the next few years, is because to have brands going all into it, they have to have a big audience, and the audiences just aren't there and won't be there for a while because the numbers
Hmm.
aren't there. And so I think it will drive that eventually and make some incredible experiences. But also, I think there'll be a huge pendulum swing back to the real world, and people will really want to, go and do some amazing physical, experiences. And I like the fact that that is always going to coexist. Whether it be an amazing roller coaster to launch a product, or just a sort of an incredible sort of immersive theater type experience, and something like that. When you layer then on the technology to make it even more sort of socially rich, or ability to share, then I
Yeah.
think that is the case. So I think there will definitely be a coexist. I don't think it relies on it. I think brand experiences will still be a lovely mix of physical, just physical and digital, and then purely digital. And then on the digital brand experiences, a bit like when sort of cutting the teeth back at AKQA days, where these technologies, from broadband speeds to mobile smartphones to flash, even back then, they allow just a huge new array of opportunities for brands to create
Yeah.
experiences. And I think that's what those emerging technologies will do in the right way, but it has to be driven or in parallel with audience adoption as well.
Definitely. So, I'm hoping that with these last few questions, we can kind of summarize everything we've discussed today and maybe give listeners your bullet point predictions. And apologies in advance, as this is sort of a convoluted question, but where do we go from here with building out experiences?
I think you got to focus on the audience, and got to
Hmm.
focus on, it seems maybe an obvious thing to say, but it feels, people can get lost in the technology, and they can get lost in what is possible and
Yeah.
what might be possible, and especially going with the sort of, oh, it could be, you could do this headset and this one bit of tech. It's like, if there isn't a big enough amount of people who has access to that, then
Yeah.
that's going to be a bit of a problem. We know obviously the ubiquity of smartphones and the power of smartphones, and just with
Hmm.
audio, there's amazing experiences to be done, and just being reminded of who are we trying to connect with, what
Yeah.
engagement are we trying to get, and how we can sort of fashion experiences around that. So really getting in the mind. That's why design thinking is so important, especially when we go into the physical world, and it's not just obviously a digital experience. We're trying to work out where people are, what
Yeah.
they're doing, how they're feeling. And the fantastic and quite tough thing from a UX perspective, designing some of these experiences is like the context. When we can create something that understands your context and understands where a person is. It's very hard to create experiences, but it's also very powerful to create experiences that really resonate because they are very personalized and very, very sort of emotive. So I think getting into the audience mindset is just couldn't be more important. Design thinking, human-centered design thinking, but in a newer context, it's even more exciting than sort of going, okay, well, it's this spatial design thinking, this evolved, mindset shift of getting into like what the technology can enable a person and people to do and design around that. Then obviously connecting it to what a brand or a business is trying to achieve is
Yeah.
super important. That can't just be in the isolation of we've done something fantastic. But I think actually, one thing we're looking at more is people want to be entertained. It's a pretty obvious thing to say, but still, there's quite a lot of advertising that's disruptive, and there's quite a lot of stuff that gets in the way and is just
Hmm.
not very smart, however digital it's meant to be. So I think that entertainment factor is going to only increase, and I think at the Mill we're really well placed to capitalize on that for all the work we've done over the years, whether it be at the Super Bowl or direct to brand. It's this
Yeah.
amazing opportunity to exist in pop culture and entertain using these new formats and technologies. So I think ensuring that, yeah, we're entertaining, and that's going to drive engagement. That's going to drive interest from brands to go, okay, great, you can connect with this increasingly difficult to reach audience in increasingly difficult to reach places.
Yeah.
In these ways is I think quite exciting. So I think the audience piece first, and then connecting that with the brand.
For sure. So, what are your hopes for the future of experiences?
I'm hopeful that we get back to physically enjoying them in the real world. I mean, that sounds maybe a bit glib, but I think that's going to be such an exciting thing for everyone, for lots of other reasons, not just from a brand perspective. But I think getting back to sort of physically engaging in themes, going to wonderful events. It's meant to be
Hmm.
South by at the moment. I've had some great times at South by over the years, and and
Hmm.
and it's sad obviously seeing uh you know people not in Austin in a way, even though it's going on virtually right now. So I think that
Yeah.
mix of getting back to physical events is really exciting. But then taking all the learnings that we've enjoyed from developing at the rate of knots virtual experiences and building them out into sort of being larger platforms or larger sort of frameworks for brands and businesses to go, hey, this is a way now that you can engage with people, and people are demanding it more and more. So creating sort of experiences that live on past this, that audiences can interact with, is really important.
Hmm.
I think I think a key thing to focus on is looking at the underlying pieces of technology and not being too blinded by the sort of the surface shiny stuff. So really building a real-time capability
Yeah.
that maybe isn't just on one pipeline but on multiple pipelines, because that's the future of well, it's the future of 3D.
Yeah.
And so having that ability to operate in that space, whether it be for a piece of linear content, virtual production, or whether it be a piece of interactive content, either via a game or through a headset where you have your own agency. I think that's really important. The underlying piece of technology, and even things like USD formats, which we're finding is revolutionizing, visual effects. It's
Hmm.
also the format that obviously Pixar developed and then Apple are using, and it's going to be, that format that really drives forward the really exciting area, which is sort of the
Yeah.
the digitization of the real world, the kind of the mirror world, metaverse, that whole piece, which again, not getting too lost in those kind of buzzwords,
Hmm.
and everyone has a copy of Snow Crash on their desk, but understanding, almost unpicking, well, what does the metaverse actually mean? What does it mean
Yeah.
this year, next year, 3, 5, 10 years? And really looking at and being in places like Roblox and Animal Crossing and Fortnite and these emerging areas, because and decoding what it is that makes those incredible experiences for audiences. It
Yeah.
is the social mechanics, it is the sort of shareability to the creation tools. So I think that's another key area. And I think, yeah, the creator economy is a fascinating area that kind of chimes pretty well with the Mill and us being makers at heart, which is, it's such an exciting area to be right now. And there's platforms, for example, like the PlayStation 4 game Dreams, which just allows such an incredible tool set
Hmm.
accessible to anyone to
Yeah.
make music or make a film or make some effects or recreate the UE5 demo. And so all of these experiences, I think, are now possible via some pretty powerful technology. And I think, tapping into that and partnering with people like that is going to be important moving forward as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just thinking about the past year and how everything changed so drastically so quickly, as we were literally sitting in the middle of the 1 year mark for me at least of working from home, and just I the one thing I've really wanted to acknowledge this past week is that people who are creators and who are making advancements in all different kinds of areas of creativity have kind of been able to change where they're getting their inspiration from day to day in comparison to what they were doing before. So, whether you've been working from home, whether you decided to uproot yourself and move or just spend a month at an Airbnb somewhere different, people are being inspired creatively and able to think in a different way that I think that they ever were before when we were 5 days a week, 9 to 5, going to the office. And our creative space, if you will, was supposed to be, whatever four walls our office sat in, or whatever client's office we were going to, or whatever boardroom we were collaborating with. And I'm sure I know that there was a lot of roadblocks in the beginning. Like it was a struggle to try to wrangle my team at the beginning of the pandemic and get through everything and try to figure out what our new normal was. But watching how fast things changed and how fast people welcomed so much change and how creatively things started to develop was just so fascinating.
Yeah, I think the remote working thing has been, I mean, but thank goodness there has been some positives out of this, because I
Hmm.
think that has been incredible, and I think it's changed the older generation's view of that term, because it still was evident in places I worked where someone was working from home. It was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, it was still, that was
Yeah.
still a sort of reaction, which
It's a
was kind of
stigma. Yeah.
crazy,
Hmm.
and when actually it was people getting more work done, because when you're in an open plan studio, sometimes everyone's on their headphones anyway, but when they need to get some real deep work done. So I think that's been fantastic. And like you say, it's been harder for some people as well if they don't have
Yeah.
the space or the environment. But I think that flexibility is here to stay, and a
Yeah.
necessity, certainly in the creative industries and others as well, thankfully. But in
Yeah.
the creative industries, it's really important to have a bit of a flexibility. But
Hmm.
with that, I love the idea of when we do come together again, we really have to curate those moments, really, really smartly, and really
Yeah.
focus. And so, like, we're going
Hmm.
to have this 2 hour session or 3 hour session with our teams, or with a client, to really work through some problems which in the past perhaps was never planned properly, or wasn't given the attention it needed. But we know
Yeah.
those times are going to be so much more precious. Then
Hmm.
I think they're going to be really transformative for working relationships and client relationships, to develop ideas and break new ground in those spaces. And I think we'll adapt physical spaces to accommodate that better, because also you'll
Definitely.
still probably be dialing a few people in, because the global nature of the business now is, it required a level of remote work anyway. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember times where, it's that terrible time where you're having a big meeting and someone is working from home, and it's like you're trying to dial them in and maybe the tech didn't work. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll just have to catch them up, later. It's like that's unacceptable now. You need
Yeah.
to have a facility to be able to just seamlessly connect the
Hmm.
network, other people, if they're there or not. But when you do come together, I'm really excited about sort of working through some of those problems with a physical whiteboard, and
Yeah.
post-its, and ideas, and because you just have that more immediacy at the moment, because the technology isn't quite there to
Right.
facilitate that immediacy.
I agree that I think that they will be those moments and those meetings and those creative briefs and collaborative meetings will be more meaningful going forward because we've been deprived of it for the past year.
Mm.
Um, but I just wanted to thank you again for being on with us today, Alex. All this information was so incredible, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I hope so. I've been, hugely enjoyed talking about it. Really, really good.
Amazing. Thank you again. Thanks everybody for listening to today's episode. You can learn more about Mill Talk by following the Mill via @MillChannel across platforms. You can also learn more about Lime Studios via @limestudios.tv on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to search the hashtag Mill Talk to stay in the know on serious topics and guests. We'll see you next time.